More than 2 seconds is the difference now. Australia has the gold medal and it's keeping. They come down to get the bell. Australia's pursuit team, they go through with 1 lap to go. The margin now is over 2 seconds. It's 2.05 seconds. The Australians would have to lose a rider to lose the gold medal as they come down the back straight with half a lap left to go.
Michael Grender from Kevin Nichols, Dean Woods, they'll almost certainly finish in this perfect formation. 3 riders as the Grender goes up the track. Woods comes through underneath, and here's the gold medal to Australia.
A sensational performance by Australia's pursuit team, winning the Australians' first gold medal of the 1984 Olympic Games. A superb performance. And that, Dick, would be Australia's first cycling gold medal since 1956, I would think.
But the Australians are doing everything right throughout, not panicking. And there's Michael Grender, Kevin Nichols and Dean Woods. And Michael Turner has now joined them as the victorious foursome.
And there's the announcement. The gold medalists in the team pursuit, Australia.
Michael Grender, a 22-year-old from Tasmania. I know the father, Ron Grender, will be immensely proud this moment. Michael Grender suffered a bad head injury last year, has come back to now take out a gold medal for Australia. The captain of the team, Kevin Nichols from New South Wales, 29 years of age. Undoubtedly the reward for many years of service. He's been to 3 Olympic Games, 2 Commonwealth Games. Now Michael Turner, 26 years of age from South Australia, the current Commonwealth individual pursuit champion. A very proud young man indeed. And the final rider, of course, the 18-year-old wonder boy from Wangaratta in Victoria, Dean Woods, the current world junior pursuit champion, runner-up in the 30-kilometre points race, receiving his just recompense for missing out by 5/100ths of a second for the bronze medal in the individual pursuit.
Yes, thanks, Tony. Well, let's hope that our 4 cyclists can repeat the performance of our 4 swimmers in the pool, because these are the 4 members of the Australian team pursuit, 4,000 metre team pursuit, who are on the track for their qualifying round. There are 14 teams attempting to qualify for the quarterfinal rounds of the team pursuit, and the 8 fastest qualifiers during this qualifying round will go through to the quarterfinals. These qualifying rounds are being ridden as time trials. They're not races. The quarterfinals, of course, will be. So times are absolutely crucial. And at the moment, the fancied Italian combination has returned the best time of 4 minutes 28.47 seconds. But we just seen the Danish team record the second sub at 4 minute 30 time. Their performance was 4 minutes 29.79 seconds. Now the West Germans are still to ride. They're the reigning world champions. And the Americans, who provided 2 medalists in the individual pursuit, so are obviously a very strong combination, had a false start in their first heat, and we're still waiting to see whether or not they're going to be allowed to rewrite it, or whether in fact they may have been disqualified. Now here's the start for Australia. Charlie Walsh, the Australian coach, speaking to the 4 members of the Australian team, who are Michael Grender, Kevin Nichols, Michael Turner and Dean Woods.
It looks like it's going to be the South Australian Michael Turner with the responsibility of leading the team away. They're using the 45-degree start. Teams can choose whether to start straight across the track or back at 45 degrees, and this of course allows each member to keep in sight the rider immediately below him, because the technique is to fall into that wind-saving formation as quickly as possible as they move away from the stationary start. Charlie Walsh giving them the last instructions and the time to beat, and the full time 4 minutes 28 seconds to beat. We'll be able to give you updates throughout the ride, because the comparative sectional times are most important. Michael Turner leads them away, and they're all in good formation. Turner leads away first of all from Michael Grender of Tasmania. It'll be Kevin Nichols of New South Wales in that 3rd position, and Dean Woods, the rider who was so unfortunate to miss out on that bronze medal in the individual pursuit, on 4th position.
Charlie Walsh, the Australian team coach, in the right-hand side of your screen, talking to the 4 members of the Australian team pursuit. And on the left, their opponents, Belgium. The Australians will start in the front straight, the Belgians in the back straight. This is a quarter-final. The loser is eliminated. If a team is caught, the other team must continue to ride because times will be important as far as the draw for the semi-finals is concerned. Comprising Michael Grender, Kevin Nichols, Michael Turter and Dean Woods. And they have won their way through to the semi-finals, so they're within 1 race, 1 victory now of the...
And there's, in fact, one of the Australians has gone down. It looks like it's Dean Woods who's...
And sparks really flew at the velodrome earlier today. Officials from Australia felt the Americans should have been disqualified after a series of track mishaps, including a spectacular crash. Americans were accused of bending the rules to suit themselves. On the first start, they travelled only a few metres before Patrick McDonough pulled off the track with a loose wheel nut. He was disqualified, so the depleted American team had the difficult job of qualifying with only 3 riders.
Very, very difficult because naturally the rest that each rider gets when he drops back onto the rear of his teammates is all important. In this case, they're going to have some 50% less time to recover. Each rider, of course, will be facing the wind just that more often.
The trio did a magnificent job, but the gruelling pace started to tell in the final lap.
The bike race. The time is taken on the third rider. In fact, Emery's having difficulty maintaining contact. Now, Brett Emery, the third rider in the team, is having difficulty maintaining contact, and they've got it slow. In fact, down, both down, and unfortunately, that will rule them out of the contest. Now, what happened there was that Emery lost the contact. Nitz was the rider leading through. The second rider, the gold medalist Hegg, tried to drop down into the intervening gap. He hit the wheel of Nitz. Emery went down first, and the following rider, Emery, went right over the top.
Australian team manager Ray Godkin said the American team should have been disqualified over the loose wheel nut. He said the rule book stipulates that if you stop and the fault is a human one and not mechanical, no restart is allowed. The team standings were posted, but then the Americans were given a third chance to qualify.
We were referring rather facetiously yesterday to the fact that in this technological age in cycling, it won't be long before we have winged wheels. And this is starting to look more and more like an America's Cup contest. The Americans certainly being given every opportunity to qualify here. And that's not to suggest that anything illegal has been done, but our understanding of the rules were that if they incurred a mishap during the race that was a legitimate mishap, well, then they could restart. But when they crashed, it seemed that they would be eliminated from the event.
In fact, that has been the case in past history when a team, almost certain medalist a few years ago in Olympics, crashed in the final lap and did not receive a medal.
In fact, we even had the qualifiers put up on the monitor and on the scoreboard, the 8 fastest qualifiers, and the Americans were excluded from that. And there has been no official announcement that they will be given another restart. I think they assume no one's watching.
They're following a good line, but they're now at the point where they're going to have to start to protect their third rider, and you can see the gold medalist Hegg has done a full turn of pacing at that point. In fact, he's going to continue on and do another lap, so it looks like he's doing at least a lap and a half. He may even shepherd them in from there. That's Hegg from Nitz. Emery's the third rider, and the middle rider now is the one they're going to have to protect for these remaining laps. Harvey Nitz down the back straight. Emery's the next one, then Hegg. And they're going to come through this time. They went through in 3 minutes 14 for the last lap, and this lap will be the indication because we're looking for a time at the 1 kilometre to go. It's 3:25, and that puts them inside the fastest 8, at least on the borderline of the fastest 8. So if they can keep it up, they may well qualify into the next round.
Yes, it's been a very noteworthy performance by the Americans to be able to maintain this pace with just 3 riders. It's going to be touch and go as to whether or not they qualify, and they've got to try and keep these 3 riders as close together as they possibly can, because the time, as we've mentioned, is taken on the third rider. The third rider over the line is the official time for the team, and at the moment they're being able to keep that team together. They're riding a very well-drilled race for 3 riders in this team's pursuit qualifying event.
What a magnificent performance by Hegg. He's virtually doing all the work. Now at 4:08, they're inside the time of the 8 fastest qualifiers with 1 lap to go, so they've only got to keep it going, and they are going to qualify through to the next round. Now, if they finish 7th fastest, they will, of course, meet the Australians in the next round, and that's bad news for the Australians. The Hegg is still controlling affairs. The gold medalist Hegg's going to bring them through almost lone-handed. He's qualified them through in 4 minutes 29.92. 4 minutes 29.92 will qualify them well up. It's in fact about 4th fastest.
And later in the day, another close call for the gold medal favourites as they took on the team from Denmark in the quarterfinals. They came from behind on the last lap to win by the barest possible margin, 100th of a second.
The Danes led for the first half of the race. The Americans then snatched the lead briefly. The Danes got back in front. They were 0.13 of a second down going into the last lap, and they made it up to win by 1/100th of a second. And gee, haven't we seen some drama? Thanks, Bruce, and good morning, everyone, from the Olympic Velodrome. All set for a start in the second semi-final of the team's pursuit, Australia versus Italy. Italy, the fastest qualifier. Australia, who were 4th in the World Amateur Championship last year, the 4th fastest qualifier. And this is a do-or-die bid by the Australians. Victory here would take them straight through to the final, in which they will meet the Americans. We've just seen America win their semi-final in dramatic fashion against West Germany, who in fact conceded defeat after about 4 laps, obviously intent on saving themselves for the crucial race for the bronze medal when they realised they couldn't win that semi-final, albeit that it was in the very early stages of the race.
So in fact they've moved away again. Turner's giving it everything in that down the back straight. Turner's led them through. They're up to 0.86 of a second, and I think that Turner will maybe call it a day shortly. Yes, in fact, Turner's lost contact after that desperate turn of pace, and Nichols is going to bring them through after that do-or-die effort. He's got the margin up to 1 second, so it's looking good for Australia.
This is a magnificent performance by the Australians. They've really clapped on the pace in the last 3 laps, and they've stretched their lead, as Dick Cole did, over a second. Now it's back to 0.95 of a second as the Italians start to make their charge. The Australians have got just over a lap and a half to go, so it's going to take a very stout performance by the Italians to snatch this race. The Australians have gone away again. The margin is now 0.99 of a second. A superb performance by the Australians. They only have to sustain this pace for 1 more lap, and they can go through to the final, and that would be a sensational performance. 0.9 of a second. The Australians in front as they come round with 3/4 of a lap to go.
The Italians are desperate, but they're not doing any better. Kevin Nichols is bringing through rather Dean Woods this final last half lap, and he's doing it well. They'll form into a formation to bring the third rider across the line, and they can go through that final. Australia's gone through with the victory together by 1.56 seconds. It is the third medal to Australia.
What an upset! What an upset! Australia, the Australian team pursuit. The pursuit team, Michael Greenberg, Kevin Nichols, Michael Turner, and Dean Woods, the 4th fastest qualifier in the semi-finals, has defeated the fastest qualifier, Italy. A superb performance by the Australians, and they're through to the final where they'll meet the United States. The Australian pursuit team about to ride off for the gold medal against the United States of America. The Australian team of Michael Grender, Kevin Nichols, Michael Turner and Dean Woods will start in the front straight. The Americans will start and finish in the back straight. They're formidable opponents, the Americans, and they have the advantage of having had a very short semi-final. The Australians rode a sensational race in their semi-final in a time of 4 minutes 23.56 seconds, one of the best times ever by an Australian pursuit team. The Australians were 4th in the World Championships last year, but it's interesting to note that only Michael Turner remains from that team. He's a member of this team, and he is the only one that rode in those World Championships. The Australian pursuit team attempting to become the first Australian cycling medalists since 1972, when Clyde Sefton won a silver in the road race, John Nicholson a silver in the sprint, and Danny Clark a silver in the time trial. This is the final of the team's pursuit at the Olympic Velodrome, Australia versus the United States.
They're the American team getting set, and they have, of course, have got the revolutionary bicycles, the aerodynamic shaped helmets, the latex covered skin suits, ultimate in streamlining on the American boys, and the camera will shortly pick up the Australians. Those helmets, of course, look quite extraordinary until the rider settles into his racing position, and that long trailing edge then settles down over his neck and makes a continuous aerodynamic line from the top of the head round the back.
Interesting to look at the entourage around the Americans. They've used these delaying tactics in almost every final except the sprint. When they had 2 riders, it was a head-to-head clash between the Americans, but they did it to Dean Woods in the ride-off for the bronze medal in the individual pursuit. and they're going to take plenty of time again. The final of the team's pursuit, and there's the start. The Australians starting and finishing in the front straight. There's the Americans, and they've already lost a rider.
A sensation. One of the American riders has pulled his foot out of the clip. Now that is not a recognised mechanical mishap, so the Americans are down to 3 riders from the start.
What a great break for Australia, right up the start of the team's pursuit. The Australians with their 4 riders intact, and that will make their task a lot easier than any team that has to ride with 3, although we saw the Americans record a sensational time yesterday in their qualifying time trial with just 3 riders in the team.
Now the rider who's out of the race has got to get it right out of the way, and that's Dave Grills, who was brought in for these last couple of rounds, and the Australians are already down to a good pace and almost a second in advance of the American threesome, and this is a wonderful chance for a gold medal for Australia. 4 riders still intact. They're being led down the straight this time and being told to keep the pace even, and that's Kevin Nichols leading them through. Dean Woods, in fact, they're very similar on the bike, and that's Michael Turner down the back straight with a good pace from the 4 Australians. Grender is about to take over the pacing from Nichols, and Woods on the last position.
They come round now, they will have completed the first kilometre, and this is a significant stage of the race. Let's see what the situation is. Australia is 1.2 seconds in front. They've gone through the first kilometre in 1 minute 9 seconds, so that's a good time, and it's a very handy lead, although the Americans are renowned as slow starters, and now the crowd is starting to chant USA. That's something else that the Australians are going to have to contend with. They'll have to retain and maintain their composure throughout the course of this race, because there's going to be intense barracking and intense pressure on the track.
Now they've come back to 0.79 seconds, but I feel that the Americans are starting to panic. Of course, they've got the individual gold medalist in Steve Hagen. He's the one that's bringing them through. Also along the Harvey Nitz, the bronze medalist in the individual pursuit, so they've got a tremendous amount of talent there, plus the technological advantage, but Australia riding a good controlled race. 0.87 seconds is the difference, as the Australians still with 4 riders and a psychological advantage, knowing they can control their effort and still come home with plenty of leeway.
Half a second is the difference, and the Australians are coming around now to get the 6 lap to go sign, and their coach Charlie Walsh is standing in the front straight. He's telling them to keep it steady. They've got their 4 riders intact. The difference now is just 0.47 of a second, with Australia still in front and half the race completed.
And they're not panicking. Charlie Walsh giving the indication not to panic. Michael Turner climbs the banking, turns the pacing over to Michael Grender, all intact and still holding an advantage as they've got 5 laps to go. Now send them along, says Charlie. Michael Grender leads them through and peels up the track to turn the pacing over to Kevin Nichols, and we've seen in each of the earlier races that Michael Turner has been the one to put in a very hard lap and lift the pace in these concluding laps.
The United States still trail by half a second. The Australians maintaining their form. They've got good line. They're a well-drilled unit at the moment, but the pressure will go on. They're coming around now with just over 3.5 laps to go. So they've still got a long way to ride, but the Americans with 3 riders, Australia couldn't ask for a better situation from which to win a gold medal.
Kevin Nichols about to peel up the track, and this is the point of the race where Michael Turner has sacrificed his chance in each of the earlier races. They're the Americans in screen, but Turner leads them through at this time, and Walsh is sooling them on. Michael Turner, I feel, will do a full lap here and possibly then drop out of the race.
At the 1 kilometre to go mark, Dick, Australia led by 1.27 seconds. They've increased their lead, and I would say they've increased it even further. Yes, it's now 1.5 seconds. Could this be Australia's first gold medal at the Olympic Games?
There's Turner off the back, and the 3 left are Michael Grender, Dean Woods and Kevin Nichols. Michael Grender leads them through with an advantage of 2.16 seconds. They'd have to have an accident to lose the race from here. Kevin Nichols down the back straight from Dean Woods. There's the Americans coming through, throwing everything into this last desperate effort.
More than 2 seconds is the difference now. Australia has the gold medal in its keeping. They come down to get the bell. Australia's pursuit team, they go through with 1 lap to go. The margin now is over 2 seconds. It's 2.05 seconds. The Australians would have to lose a rider to lose the gold medal as they come down the back straight with half a lap left to go.
Michael Grender from Kevin Nichols, Dean Woods, they'll almost certainly finish in this perfect formation. 3 riders as the Grender goes up the track. Woods comes through underneath, and here's the gold medal to Australia.
A sensational performance by Australia's pursuit team, winning the Australians' first gold medal of the 1984 Olympic Games. A superb performance. And that, Dick, would be Australia's first cycling gold medal since 1956, I would think.